Thank you for joining today. Today is one of a series of episodes that I'll be doing on the topic of love at first sight. Is it really a thing? Is it what we think it is? Is it all it's cracked up to be? Do we need it to have a great relationship? Because we make a lot of assumptions about love. So I hope you enjoy this episode today.
It's almost like having sex the first time. The first time you have sex matters so much less than like, how does every other time feel? It's only downhill from there. Then that's also terrible, right? Like you don't want to just keep looking back at the past and being like, oh, those were the times when X.
I'm Heather Grzych, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrzych.com or on Instagram at heathergrzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Okay, so today I'm here with Ben Von Wong, and I'm going to have Ben introduce himself to you all today so he can tell you a little bit about himself and maybe also answer the question like, why does Heather want to have a conversation with me about love at first sight?
Well, I've actually been trying to rewrite my story, but the standard script has been, my name is Benjamin Von Wong. I'm an artist and activist that has generated over 100 million views for different causes like fast fashion, ocean plastics, and electronic waste. The reason I'm trying to rewrite it is because I think it puts the onus of success on the number of views you get on something, which I'm not sure is the right metric. So what I do is I essentially create large-scale art installations to highlight different issues. And I also create a bunch of digital assets to tell that story in different ways. As far as why I'm here to talk about love, I'm not too sure. Tell me, why am I here, Heather?
You know, Ben, with you, it was love at first sound. I heard your voice when we were on Clubhouse. And I was like, well, I liked what you were saying, but I was also like, I just love his voice. And yeah, so maybe there's also something to like love at first sound, which we could talk about. And so the background on this conversation is I have been dabbling in writing fiction. Well, sort of not dabbling because I'm 100 pages into writing something. So that I wouldn't say that's dabbling at this point, but because I've never written fiction before and I'm a nonfiction writer, I have a nonfiction book published and I've literally never written fiction before. And I don't even read a lot of it. And so I started doing this because I had an idea of something that I wanted to convey that felt somehow it would be better to convey an idea in fiction that people might somehow absorb it more that way than they would in nonfiction. Anyway, that's why I went down this path. And so one of my characters that I've been writing about is a male who falls in love. And he falls in love, and I'm writing this scene because I think in scenes, and my writing has a lot of dialogue in it. It's almost like a screenplay. So again, I've never written fiction. I don't know my style yet. I'm figuring it out. And this writing group I've been going to in San Francisco, bunch is like a pack of dudes. And all of them are like, because I got this scene about this guy when he first meets this girl that he ends up forming a relationship with. They're like, it wouldn't happen like that. And it got me fascinated because they were all giving me their opinions about how it would happen when a man did fall in love or meet someone that he was going to fall in love with or something like that. And so then I just started having random conversations like this cafe in San Francisco, which is I go and write in sometimes. And this guy told me what it feels like for him when he first, falls in love with someone. And I was like, that's really interesting. I want to talk about this with people. And I want to see, is there a common thread or is it really, really, really different? And is it really a thing, love at first sight? So first, let me start with a question for you. Do you actually believe in love at first sight?
I think I believe in the concept of it. I do not think that I have personally experienced, at least not in the sort of world slowing down, girl flicks her hair. Everything goes in super slow motion and you just feel your heart melt and you know that she's the one. No, never felt that personally.
So is that how you assume it would feel, like these things that you described?
I guess so. I mean, so much of the stories that we tell ourselves are informed by the stories that we see around us. And I think that's maybe the most common story that we might get a sense of. So when I'm thinking love at first sight, I'm imagining, I'm extrapolating all the way to soulmates and, finding the one right person that's there for you. And so I guess to a certain extent, yeah. But as far as like actually, I think we're always forming opinions about people when we meet them. And I've always liked to say, and I've told this to my current partner, that I just generally have crushes on everyone that I meet, male or female. Like I meet people, I think they're just fascinating and I want to know everything about them. And then you have all these stories that you tell yourself about them. And then at some point you start completing that puzzle with pieces of reality and you realize like, oh, well, I guess it was not that exciting to start off with. And then things kind of like taper off. And I think you start having a better assessment of reality. So I think for the bulk of my relationships, that tends to be the trend where I'll meet someone, they're fascinating, they're super cool, they're really talented, whatever it happens to be. We have a great conversation. I think there's something there from a friendship perspective, and then it tapers off for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super common. I've experienced that. I think someone told me that you don't ever know somebody until you've been in a relationship with them for like 8 or 9 months. And that's when you start sort of dropping your armor and like stop caring about being on your best behavior or trying to make an impression or whatever. And you just kind of slip into your true conditioned self. And then you get like a real view of people. Yeah.
I think so. And then I guess maybe the other thing that's maybe like pseudo relevant to the conversation, it may or may not be. I don't know what you're doing all this like large surveys. And so you have more stories than I do, but I identify as someone who's demisexual. I'm not sure if you've heard that term before.
I've heard it, but I can't remember exactly. Yeah. Tell me about that.
I discovered it because it was on Hinge back when I was dating. And I was like, what is this demisexual thing? It sounds really cool. And so I Googled it and it turns out demisexual is basically you don't feel sexual attraction unless you first have an emotional connection with somebody first. And so most of the time I was dating online, I just put that very prominently in my profile because anytime I was meeting someone, I was actually much more interested in just having a conversation and seeing if they were an interesting person and if we could have a great connection in some way, shape, or form. And so I think that as just like a general being, I like to move around the world. I like to find interesting people that you have some level of sparkage with. And even in the instances where I feel attracted to someone, it generally has much more of a long tail effect than love at first sight, per se. Like I have a lot of attraction at first sight or curiosity at first sight or intrigue at first sight. I don't know, like love feels like a little bit one step further because maybe I'm just older now. So I'm jaded and I know that I don't think that's how love works in my world.
So, we feel things in our bodies and then our minds are creating stories and we have imagination, and imagination can also spark things in our bodies, right? So I'm just kind of curious, this idea of sparkage. What is that?
I mean, I guess sparkage to me is like a stroke of inspiration, except now it's involving like another person. So in the same way that you might see something and it might prompt an idea and suddenly your mind is off to the races and you're completing this story with all the different variables that make it a great story. I think there's something which is the same with relationships and love. Like, I mean, when you have a wonderful time with a new person and you experience a sense of human connection and possibility, that is kind of sparkage too, right? Like this idea that, oh my gosh, I think we have something here that was not immediately apparent on the surface. This could be the beginning of so much more. How exciting. And so maybe sparkage is a feeling of kind of like the call to adventure in a book where you just feel pulled towards something. There's now a question of like, oh, this is not just a passing interaction, but maybe an interaction that will lead somewhere else. And sometimes it takes time for that to manifest. Like there are people that I've known for a long period of time that only because certain conditions were met that, we ended up spending more time together that went like, oh, there is a whole other world here that I had not known was possible. And so, yeah, I think inspiration is probably the closest word that I can come to it.
Mm-hmm. And then it's like, is there enough motivation to like hang around with this person more? And then the things that you discover are either going to attract you more or turn you off or connect you or disconnect you.
Right. I think there's no wrong answer, right? Like none of these things are wrong. I think what's exciting is to pull on that string and see how far you take it. I think when it comes to love, for whatever reason, we get really attached to an outcome. I think there's like an element of, oh no. For example, if you're in a brand new situationship with a person and then you're like, oh, should I text them? Maybe I'm talking too much, maybe I'm being too open, because you have this feeling of finite ability to interact with a person. But I don't know. I think to me, at least as I've gotten older, there's a lot less games and a lot more like, okay, well, this is who I am. And if you can't meet me where I'm at, then at this moment, then that's fine. But that doesn't mean it's over. It just means maybe not right now. And that's okay. I actually recently had a conversation with a girl online, and I've been following her content for a pretty long time and recently liked one of her latest videos. And I think I left a comment on her video on Instagram, and she, I guess, stalked my Instagram profile, sent me a message, said, oh my gosh, I love your work. And I've been following her work for over a year at this point. I've sent her videos to my current partner, and I just think she's brilliant. She's very insightful. She's gorgeous and very talented. And so I was like, oh, cool. I have this new connection with this person that previously was just some face on the internet. And here we are talking. And we started a conversation and went back and forth a couple times. And then the conversation just tapered off and died. And I was like, okay, I guess that's it. Which is fine. It doesn't change any of those things about her. And it doesn't mean that we may not meet one day in the future when I'm in town. But in this moment in time, it's just like, well, I don't really feel like forcing anything and having to make that interaction happen, even though I felt this initial excitement. And she probably felt some other initial excitement from her version of me that created the conditions for the initial outreach. But that didn't mean that that story was going to actually like play itself out in all the ways that it needed to. And the story's not over. Who knows where the story is going to go? But at this moment, it feels like a slightly closed chapter, and that feels okay. It doesn't change any of the initial like inspiration at first sight, or her feeling inspired to reach out, us feeling inspired to have a conversation, and then, nope, it's fine.
Hey, Ben, do you feel like you connect easily with people?
I think it depends on the environments. Some people find it really hard to connect with me, and other people find it really easy. I think it may depend also on just my state of mind and where I'm at in the moment, not so much in life. I have a tendency of being very friendly when I'm relaxed, very easygoing. But then if I'm like stressed out about something with a project or otherwise, I tend to be very curt and very blunt to the point. And so I think people who've worked with me on projects tend to have a very different perspective than people who've like chilled with me and hung out in a social setting. I kind of like to say that I have different hats, I suppose, that I put on and off. And I toggle between different states of mind. And I tend to be, I guess, classically, like most guys, like one track minded, one thing at a time. So if in one mindset, I can be a lot more friendly than in another mindset.
Yeah. I mean, I know you as the former, not the like super focused.
Right.
But I could see, because your work is very detailed and very planned out, and there's a lot of moving parts. And so you have this vision. It's not like a fuzzy vision. Your vision is like a very detailed vision.
Right. And there's just like a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot of budgets moving around. There's a lot of people, and everything rides on me. And so there's a lot of like, there's a reputational stake. There's a budgetary stake. There's like just a whole bunch of things involved. And so, yeah, I oscillate between being really friendly and really not. But I'd say on average, if I want to be charming, I can sort of pull it off to a certain extent. I can't
tell me about what you do. Okay. Well, tell me, what's something charming that you do?
What do I do in order to build connection with people? I think it really boils down to just being really interested in what other people are doing. And so I just ask a lot of questions. I try to synthesize whatever it is they're speaking through and repeat it back to them in interesting ways. And I try to deliver some level of insight or idea. I guess I'm always trying to be, it's just one of my core values is to be of service to someone. And so in every conversation, I'm generally trying to either A, solve their problem, or B, think of like someone or something or some resource that may be an interesting thing to reflect back to them. And so I'm generally always in that state. So it's a somewhat of an attentive state of just trying to like listen and hear and meet people where they're at. And sometimes people aren't really feeling deep and they're feeling like really more carefree and playful. And then I just try to match that energy. So a combination of mirroring and listening and a desire to be of service. And it's harder to do when I'm really not interested in a person or my mind is distracted by something else. And so there are certain conditions in which these sort of attributes come a little easier than not.
So do you tend to date when you're not working on a project because you're like too busy when you're on a project?
So I actually just went, I guess this is a fun story. I just got out of a 7-year long distance cross-continental relationship that was monogamous starting in February of last year. And after that breakup happened, it was pretty clear, like we had tried many times to repair the relationship and we still loved each other and it was a really good breakup. But it's really clear to me that, all right, I need to set some kind of a marker and get back to dating. And so I ended up installing every single dating app I could. And I went on 13 dates in 9 cities, 3-second dates, and learned a lot about myself. In the process of dating, I had to rediscover who I was in relation to another person, right? Like, how do you define as like a single human? What are the customs? What are people's expectations? Like, I had like no idea. And so following a bunch of my initial dates, especially, I would do these dating debriefs. And so 2 or 3 days after we would go on this date, whatever it happened to be, I would just say like, hey, I just wanted to follow up on our date. As you know, I'm recently out of a relationship and I just have a bunch of questions that I was like wondering if you'd be open to like looking to answering. And it'd be everything from, did your online impression of me match me in person? Like, or at some point the date felt a little bit long. Was that just in my head? Or like, did you feel that way too? Or, you know, the goodbye felt a little bit awkward. Like, was I supposed to make a move? Was it fine? Like, can you give me some insights into what's supposed to happen there? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I got a chance to like really get that feedback loop that I think is missing from so many dating experiences where you only have asymmetrical information because it's sort of like, I don't know, for whatever reason, it seems to be not the thing people do to debrief about dates. But probably because I was like traveling so much, there were no stakes because I was leaving in a week. And so let's talk about it. And almost every single time the person would ask that feedback was reciprocated. They'd be like, oh, can you answer some questions about me? And it was on one of these dates that I met the girl that I'm currently dating, but I didn't think that was going to happen because I met her while I was in Limerick, Pennsylvania. But of all the places, that's like an hour and a half away from Philly Central. There's nothing to do there. I was bored out of my mind. I matched with her on Hinge. We caught up once on a date and it was nice. We talked about donut economics and activism and all the stuff that I like to talk about. And then I met her a second time to give her my leftovers because I was leaving and I was like, hey, I know that you're an activist and you don't like waste. So would you like my leftovers?
Oh, that's so romantic.
It's so romantic.
I love it. No, but it is for her.
Yeah, exactly. And by the third time we hung out, she was flying in to see a friend and they were actually on a date, but I didn't know this. And I was driving back from a dinosaur excavation in Wyoming. And so we were both in Colorado for like a 6-hour overlap. And I had my dad and a videographer. And so we just ended up agreeing to meet at Meow Wolf, which is this immersive multi-storied art exhibition, and spend a little bit of time there. And so she was on another date. I was with my dad and we had little moments of encounters. Obviously, nothing happened. But for me, there's a little bit of like sparkage there where I was just like, oh, I'd forgotten how cute this person was and the ease of laughter that we had. And so there was like a rekindling, something that was kind of there, but there needed to be that sort of gap of time, a couple more like mediocre dates in between. And then this like one like really serendipitous encounter that then triggered something new. And from that point forward, we resumed talking a little bit more regularly. We started talking about things that were a little bit deeper. I remember telling her about how I wish that in dating, people were more communicative because I had just discovered this dating app called Feeld, Feeld.
I think I've heard of this. Is this where like couples do stuff?
So it can be for anything. So basically there's like, you can put 21 different sexualities. You can be ethically non-monogamous, which is the like, I think official terminology for polyamory. More importantly, it's like, I think what's really interesting about this dating site is when you browse the profiles, you have people that are so specific about what they're looking for. They will be like, I am partnered person and I love my partner really, really much, but I have these kinks that I'm trying to play out and I'm looking for the kind of person that can deliver me this type of experience. And before we get there, you have to hang out with me and my wife at least 3 times, you know, like just like the specificity of what people were looking for was so clear to me. And I was like, I never ended up meeting anyone from that dating app, but just reading through the profiles, it really made me question, well, what am I looking for in my relationship? What am I looking for when I'm going out on a date with a person? And I was sharing this with her and I was just saying like, you know, sometimes you just want to cuddle with someone that just feels like really awkward to bring up in a date. And she said something along the lines of, well, if ever you wanted to snuggle, like I'd be totally down for it if the situation called for it. Fast forward a little bit, I ended up at Burning Man And I was doing all these Tantra based workshops because I was finding them so interesting. And essentially like Tantra was if I had to summarize it in one sentence, is like the proper expression of boundaries and desires. It's like, how do you get really good at expressing what you want? And how do you get really good at articulating what you don't want so that people can understand that? And I think in my mind, the way I thought a relationship worked, if you imagine a Venn diagram of two people's desires and you overlap them, then like that's a zone that you play in. But that's not entirely true because we do things for people that we don't personally enjoy, but we enjoy because we're giving pleasure to someone else. So a massage might be a great example of that. And so if you don't actually express that you like massages to your partner, then they're never going to do it because it's not really for their benefit. And so there's this whole zone of like getting really good at articulating what you want, that if only people knew, you might just get what you were looking for, but they just didn't know that you were looking for it. And so I'm almost done the story. And so after Burning Man, a week out of Burning Man, I was just thinking that I had done all these like wonderful workshops, but I had no one to practice with. I keep in mind, like until this point, so now we're February all the way till September, I've gone on 13 dates, but I've never kissed anyone yet because there was just like no reason to do that. But I was just like, I would like to be able to like practice some of these articulations of boundaries and desires and just have someone to practice with or play with. And I was thinking like out of all the people that I had met, who's like the one person that I felt like there was some level of safety and intimacy and connection that I could do this with. And so I ended up writing to Dana and I wrote her like this text message where I said, hey, hypothetically, if I invited you on these specific dates to Montreal, I would fly you over with points. My intention is to see the city through new eyes, live in the present and explore whatever physical intimacy we may have that we haven't had the chance to explore. Would you be open to it? And then I further clarified, I'm not trying to be your sugar daddy. Really just looking to have, just to spend time together, and you don't owe me anything. Like if you want to sleep in your own bed, that's fine. If you want to come here and just spend a couple hours together, but then do your own thing, that's also fine. Just let me know what would make you feel comfortable. But I just wanted to like kind of practice asking for this and also just seeing where it would go. And she ended up saying yes. And we ended up going on this, the best way to describe it was it's like being teenagers with money. So for like 2.5 days, it was raining, the weather was miserable, but we just went around Montreal, running around, giggling under umbrellas. Like we made out in front of a cat cafe for the first time. And it was just so much fun. It was so playful. It was so easy. And so in that sense, there was like, some of this prolonged sparkage of inspiration that then by the end of that whole thing really left us both feeling like, oh my gosh, that was such a unique and interesting experience. I wonder what more there could be. And so then we kept continuing that. And we're May right now. So almost 6 months since that sort of September 1st date. And things have just continued working out. And we've kept this practice of opening up containers every time we see each other, since we have a long distance relationship. Every time we're about to see each other, we write down our hopes, our dreams, our expectations, where we're at, things that we might want to do together, things that we're worried about. And we just kind of like articulate that every single time. And so
a lot of intention.
Yeah, a lot of intention. All right, I'm done talking.
No, that's one of the things I'm hearing through this whole experience is that you set some intentions and then you share them and you're creating common intentions,
for sure.
together.
Yeah. And I think we're both really good at communicating that. She's never had this in a relationship before. And so for her, it's really special. And I think on the contrary, I think there's this myth or there's a story that like if you don't hold tension, if you don't stay mysterious and unknown, that you kind of like lose spark. I think in our case, it's almost the reverse because we are creating so much trust and there's still no certainty on how to navigate issues that arise, except we're navigating those issues together and we're playing with different frames together and we're working on these together, as opposed to like one working with incomplete information and the other having to like guess their way through.
That's great. I've had a lot of relationship challenges in my life. I think we all have, but some of us more than others. And that's super cool, that intention piece that you added, because I've never done dating app because I'm a little older than you. And I'm one of these people that as soon as I break up with someone, I tend to meet the next person, or there's also like an overlap a lot where I'm like with someone and then I meet someone else and then I break up with the person that I'm with. Yeah.
That was popular, Heather.
That was my pattern. Well, back in the day. Yeah, but it's like, we didn't have apps. It wasn't something when I was growing up or even in my 20s that people did very much. And so you kind of had other ways to do things. But the long distance thing is its own thing. because of the amount of space involved in the relationship. And that can be like exciting, or that could be disconnecting. It can be the space element, just a lot of it can be a lot of different things. But if there's a lot of intensity, it can really withstand that space.
Yeah, I think Dana and I, we were calculating. So we've been together for like 6 months. And out of the 6 months, we probably spent like almost 80 days together, 80 or 90 days together.
Oh.
And so basically, it's like if I was living in the same town and I was living across town and we're seeing each other maybe 1 or 2 evenings per week, I actually think we're seeing each other and spending more time together and creating deeper relationships, because our time together is actually concentrated and our time apart allows us to kind of explore whatever we need to explore while also still staying somewhat connected. And so the need to like reset, I guess, the rules of our relationship. How are we going to be spending time together? What are we going to be doing together? What do we want this time to be like? Enables us to sort of see each other in very, very different light, in very different situations, as opposed to like, I don't know, the first 3 months of dating, maybe you're just seeing each other in like all these different fun settings where you start off with dinners and then you move on to walks in the park and then you go to a couple of museums. It's like, whereas our time together is like really concentrated. So now we've built projects together. We've worked, like she's helped do like interior design for my nonprofit. We work remotely on stuff together. We play together. We've traveled together. We've gone on road trips together. So we've had now like so many different styles of interacting with one another. And I think we've, even though we do have that distance, which is always a sort of a sense of uncertainty, like, oh man, I don't know when I'm going to see you next. And then suddenly it's like, oh, hey, you're at a conference that's like really close by where I'm just happened to be. So like, oh, now we get to see each other next week, which was like not the case like a week prior. And so as much as like the uncertainty is there, the sort of opportunity for exciting, unexpected surprises is also there. And so I personally really like long distance relationships, but I might be in the minority.
Yeah, I always did too, until the point where I was starting to think about, am I going to have a kid? And then I was
Yeah.
I should probably be with somebody who lives in the same town as me. Like that was one of my goals, because I knew that I had had so many long distance relationships. I was like, I should find someone that lives near me. That should be on, that's one of my intentions.
I'm not there yet, so I guess that doesn't matter.
Well, you're moving closer though.
I am. I'm going to New York. She's in Philly. We're kind of close.
I love this so much. So these guys who told me when I'm writing about this character that, because my character is a very particular sort of person who's just bright and, there's a lot of, it's not a normal, like everyday kind of person. And they're telling me it wouldn't happen like that. So they're wrong. And that's one of the things, as people listen to these interviews that I'm doing with people, that it doesn't happen just one way for people, that there's not like one way that relationships start. And that's, what I'm finding through these conversations. Well, is there anything else that you think is important to share on this topic, that if someone listening to this is contemplating whether they believe in love at first sight, or if it's possible, or confused about whether or not they've even experienced that before? Is there anything else you'd want to share about that?
I mean, I guess it's a question, like, why does it matter? Is it an important question because you feel like there's a sense of loss in your life because you've never experienced it? Or is it an important question because you want to prove that your experience of the world is a universal one? I don't know. Like, why is it
a thing? Why is love at first sight a thing?
In many ways, I think the easy thing is forming deep, short-lived bonds with people. I think that's the easy part. We probably experience this all the time if we're meeting like interesting people in any amount of regularity, right? Like you go to a conference, you might meet so many bright minds who care about the same things as you and feel an instant sense of community and connection with them. And so I think the short-term connections that we feel are the easy ones. The harder ones are the deeper sort of ones that last through the test of time. And so it's sort of the sustained love at first sight. So it's maybe like love at first sight feels a lot less valuable than like love at every sight. Like every time I see this person, it sparks a sense of joy in me. Every time I talk to this person, I feel more alive. I feel more like myself. Every time I interact with this person, like it makes me realize like how much I love being around people who are positive, because it brings out that side of me. And like, I think that's a lot more valuable than love at first sight, because when we talk about falling in love, like it's sort of implying this sense of loss of control, loss of self, of otherness, othering. But really, I think what we want are the people who help us find ourselves, but not just any version of ourselves, but the best version of ourselves. And if they can do that, not just once, but time and time again, then those relationships are worth holding on to, regardless of like what that form or function looks like. Like the word doesn't matter whether they call themselves a friend, a lover, a partner, or otherwise. Like I think the people that can really just consistently light us up and be there for us are the real gems in the entire equation.
That's super beautiful. And yeah, I think it's really worth it for people to ask themselves, why does it matter? Right? Like the whole, the first time ever I saw, maybe it's because of that song.
But it's almost like having sex the first time. Like the first time you have sex matters so much less than like, how does every other time feel? Like it's only downhill from there. Then that's also terrible, right? Like you don't want to just keep looking back at the past and being like, oh, those were the times when X. I wonder if maybe one other piece of the puzzle is our relationship to struggle. So this general notion of like hard work equals success, and the idea that things that are worth it, you have to work hard for, is something that I'm actively trying to rewrite in my own mind, where probably the thing that I value the most about my current relationship, even though on paper it feels logistically complicated, is that our relationship is easy. Like it's very easy for us to be together. It is very easy for us to make plans together. It is very easy for us to navigate the challenges that we face together. And I think ease, if anything, is maybe what like love at first sight should feel like. It should feel easy. It should feel frictionless. It should feel like you just can't wait to catch up the next time, and not like be tormented by the lack of that person there when they're not around, or tormented because there's something's missing or otherwise.
Like, because then, there's like too much grasping or something, the torment part.
Then the love then love might be the wrong word. It might become an obsession, right? Like, how do you tell the difference between love and obsession? So yeah, I think ease is the word that I've been really trying to call in. So hopefully your character is finding ease in their journey. Probably not, because otherwise it'd be no story. So every story needs good challenges.
Well, we'll find out when the book is done, which who knows, maybe it'll be like 10 years from now, because I'm like, oh, maybe I should write this nonfiction book now. And intention, right? It's so important, because without the intention, our minds just go in a million directions. And that intention is just such a rooting thing that gives so much clarity, like, with values, and it just makes everything clear about what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. Looking for a little bit of that myself. So do you have any words of wisdom on how to find that?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I always say, sometimes it's meditating, sometimes, going out to nature and going for a walk, and then an insight comes, or lots of conversations that you have with people. And then all of a sudden you kind of see where you stand on something where you may not have known before. So it's like, there's so many ways to connect back. Even meditation can turn into kind of a heady thing sometimes for people, that, it's like connecting in with the heart space and the back of the body, the insights rather than the actions.
Yeah, I'm still challenged by meditation, but the one thing that I've discovered also since Burning Man that I have really enjoyed, that is equivalent of moving meditation, has been contact improv. Have you done that before?
I don't know if I have. I mean, I had an ex-boyfriend who was a yoga teacher, and we would kind of dance and do yoga at the same time. And then we never like hit. I don't know. Is there any like fake fighting kind of stuff in it with contact improv?
So the contact improv that I do, and I'm sure there's multiple styles, it's essentially so in a jam setting, which is how I guess most contact dancing happens, you have sort of a circle of people in the middle who are dancing, usually in pairs or trios, or like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people. But essentially, when you're just two people, the whole goal is to figure out like, how do you stay in contact with one another at any point in time, whether it's like head to hip to, to hand to elbow, like it doesn't matter. You're constantly moving and you're constantly improvising. So you don't know what the other person's going to do, and they don't know what you're going to do. You just sort of ask a question. You decide to move quickly and see what happens. You decide to sit down and stop moving and see what happens. And the other person is sort of both reacting and leading at the same time. And what this does, I don't know if you've ever done like a mirroring exercise, like there's no way to like react properly if you're in your head. So you actually sort of just have to be in your body and feel where I'm at. What is this person doing? How do I want to react to this? And to me, that's been like the most therapeutic thing, because you go into these generally these like real physical flow states, which doesn't have a very high learning curve. And for the duration of like 2 hours or something, you're dancing with 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 people, back alone, solo, just you on the floor. And you are constantly sort of experiencing a forced presence by virtue of the fact that like everything is being improvisational. And I found that to be quite healing and meditative and helpful.
Yeah. I mean, also it's just this idea of like, one of the things that I pulled out of what you said was this idea of staying connected to something while you're moving.
Mm-hmm.
Because when things are stable and fixed, I go to my job every day, I live in this house, it's like the structures are so much more solid. It's like actually easier to be in the same space as another person. But then when you're a person who's a little more mobile, in Ayurveda, we would say has more vata energy, like butterfly flying around the world, meeting lots of people. There's just so many interactions that are happening and places that you're in. And then do you just kind of like fly away, little butterfly? Or is there some kind of like thing that keeps you connected even as you're moving around where, you see little birds flying through the air together, Yeah. So like staying connected when you're moving and changing and growing, which is obviously like a huge challenge in relationships where people are dynamic.
Yeah. I'm like porting that to like my life. Like, how do you stay connected to yourself and your purpose and your journey when everything around you is constantly moving and shifting and so forth? An interesting one to think about too.
Ben, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope that people find this fun. And this is part of the series I'm doing on love at first sight and getting different perspectives on it. So thank you so much for being here today. And then Ben, because, you have such amazing work, I'm personally in love with your mermaid, and what's the best way for people to look up your work? I mean, I know it's easy to find you on Instagram.
Yeah, I think if you just search Von Wong, VONWONG on whatever platform you're looking at, then it'll be pretty easy to find what I do.
Yeah, check them out. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you so much.
If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold.
I get so excited. I get this like kind of goosebump feeling when I get a booking from a new client that I haven't met yet. And I get so excited because I know that somebody has made a decision to go really, really, really deep into their healing. Because I know that Ayurveda is not a quote unquote normal thing that many people have access to, at least not in the United States where I live. So I know that when someone books with me, that they've really made a decision that they want to go deep into their healing. And so you could do that on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. You can book me for either a Ayurveda consultation if you're ready to dive in, or you can also book me for a 15-minute connection call if you're not sure where to go yet. I do have a couple offerings that are not on my website, and we could talk about that. So I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.